Right on.
Hey everybody, welcome to Oregon State University Permaculture Design Course Pro. This is the spring summer of 2023, and this is our ninth, our second to last conversation. Nice to have Matt and Carol here. Matt has a question, and it's about planning for and locating the new drive on site. It's going to have a major impact on just about everything in the design, having a tough time figuring out the best approach. No pun intended, but you did make the pun, so you still get points for that.
Let's be honest, I kind of intended it.
Yeah, I figured that. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen and we can start to pop into this. Okay,
Sure.
so fire away, sir. What are we thinking?
It's just kind of I'm just looking for general wisdom, I guess. I'm still obviously in the works on some stuff here, as you can see. But I don't know if I'm just stumping myself here, and maybe I don't need to worry about it too much. But it's obviously vacant land, no drive in place, really, right? And I'm trying to work out, obviously siting of the house, the workshop, as you can see indicated by the black boxes there. Uh, what do I need to? How can I do this intelligently? Basically, getting the driveway in and dealing with probably the stuff that like I need help with, you don't have in your brain because you can't see the site. So that's the tricky part. It's really just any best practices, I guess, something to think about here. Um, what dimensionally, how to deal with water, radius of turns,
Mhm.
slopes. There's a lot of slope going on, some steeper than others. And I've met with a few excavators. They have some ideas, but I don't necessarily trust them, to be totally honest. And so, yeah, just kind of wondering if you had any wisdom to share, ideas, thoughts.
Totally. Yeah, so I put a book into our chat here. It's called Easy, A Good Road Lies Easy on the Land, Water Harvesting from Low Standard Rural Roads. Um, and while this is, their focus is about rainwater harvesting off of roads, it's also about constructing good dirt roads. So it's in the chat there for you guys to take a look at, and you can find it online as well. So I don't feel like this is, giving away anything that might be problematic. But generally, there's a couple things to keep in mind. One, you want to crown your road. So you want your road to be crowning in the middle, so that way it sheds water off either side. If you are going on contour or slightly off contour, kind of like how we're seeing this top road, you may want to think about grading it away from any sort of infrastructure, because that top side of the road is going to capture water because it is a compacted mound. So if that then comes down to WS, what's WS?
Workshop.
Workshop. Okay. So if that comes down to workshop, you want to be conscientious that there may be a point there where you want to do what's called a rolling dip, which is basically, think of like a speed bump, but also has a ditch. But now the mound is the size of a car and the ditch is the size of a car, but it's very gradual. So this was, I believe it was created by Bill Zedike, and it was a way to transfer water from one side of a road to the other without having an incised channel into it or having like a culvert underneath it. And that's all in that book as well. So you may think, well, at some point along this, I want to make sure that we're grading away from or working within this area. And if this ends up becoming a pad of some sort, which usually happens in front of a workshop, usually you've got a bit of a pad for a turnaround or whatnot. If the water does come there, where then does it go after that? So you can think of these as kind of like big speed bumps that when the water interacts with, it's going to want to follow a long course and come to your workshop. So, and that's probably of the two, probably where you'd want that water to be shunted. But probably just before that workshop, in some way, shape, or form, you're going to want to either culvert it or rolling dip it, or put it into some productive way, so that way it doesn't interact with the workshop negatively. But with a big turnaround as well, you're going to have an issue. So, if you're thinking about costing, I guess one of my questions is, why the U versus why not come up and then have something on grade that goes to both house and workshop? because it's extra road, right? So like if you just came right up to it, here, I'll grab pretty in pink. So if you came up and then had more something like this that had sort of a T, you know, you're going to be removing probably that much road.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be a little bit less in terms of time, money, and energy.
Yeah.
Because I don't think we found any gravel on site or any road base, right? So this is going to be coming in from offsite.
Yeah, for the most part.
Right. Okay. So I might look at what the cost analysis is, the cost benefit analysis is of making a simpler road that comes up.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the other question is, why have the shop so far away from the house?
Yeah, that's probably a couple 100 feet
Okay,
right there.
cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think it's partially, to me, it's like the that turnaround thing, like having the pad,
Mhm.
staging materials, turnaround for trucks.
Sure.
And I don't know that I have enough closer to the house, but I suppose I could.
Right. You got it. Well, and it could also be that you have, you know, if this goes in this way, you just basically have a turnaround in both areas, right? You have a place for turnaround in both areas that allow trucks to come in, back up, unload, turn around, get out. So you may save a bit of money there. This is where you go back and forth with what's the pros of design one. So let's call your brown design one and the pink design two. You know, if you put a little bit more of a pad, bit more of a staging area, bit more of a place, bit more of parking as well. Whereas if you do this big turnaround, there's two issues you're going to have to deal with water, and you already have issues with water on site. So I would worry a little bit, not a huge amount, but I would worry a little bit that when you cut off this area here, this becomes its own watershed. Just grabbing a tool here. This becomes its own watershed.
Mm-hmm.
My mouse drawing is exquisite today, just beautiful. I'm just going to keep going for it. Okay. So basically at this point, you're going to have probably what will happen, because these will be raised, is this area down here will become the choke point for that water. And you're already dealing with some water issues on site. So I'd be conscientious of that.
Right. Makes sense.
Because you'll have to deal with that somehow. Whereas if you work with something like that, you only have to deal with it once, and then once it's out, it's off, right? And you
Yes.
already have what looks like some kind of stream conversation or something happening here. So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you see just to the left, there's a dashed line running from the top to bottom there and kind of curls around. That was something on the last office hours that you answered a question for me. You had sort of thrown out there, and I thought it was a good idea because that whole area there that we're working with, that's kind of like it's a relatively level, call it large terrace, maybe 50 feet wide.
sure.
And what happens is the elevation change from the gray line on the right to the gray line on the left, it happens pretty quickly as you approach, like as you go up the driveway. So right as the driveway hits that, you know, where we kind of turn off, that's like a pretty quick elevation change. I don't know, maybe 10 feet in like a 20-foot, maybe not 20-foot, maybe like 30-foot.
1 and 3. Okay.
Yeah, so it's like fairly steep. That's what I was thinking. We kind of have to go along contour to get up right there. But anyway, so back to that blue dashed line, that was sort of an idea of how to handle a lot of the water coming down from the kind of wooded area and just kind of go around the whole sort of living, you know, roaded area and direct even more around the whole kind of terrace. I don't know. What's your thoughts on that?
100%.
Is that a curtain drain?
Well, as of now, it's nothing. It could be anything.
Right now it's a pattern, right? Right now it's a pattern where you're like, here's the things we don't want wet. Here's the hill that's producing wetness. There has to be something here that interacts with it and moves it away. So that could be a compacted ditch. Probably you'd want to move towards compaction versus swale, because swale is infiltration.
Right.
So you don't necessarily want to infiltrate that water above house necessarily. Unless you decide you want to increase the forest coming towards you, but you already have an entire forest there, so it doesn't make a huge amount of sense. What you probably want to do is do a compacted ditch that will shunt that water this way at a low grade, low to slow grade, like 1 in 100. 1 in 100 basically means 100 run, 100 run, 1 rise, whatever the units you're using.
Yeah.
But something that will pacify water and slow it down. And that's probably going to be the cheapest. Doing something like a curtain drain or perimeter drain, that's gonna bump your cost. Whereas if you've got an excavator on site, and you're like, I want to ditch this way, and I want you to have it drop, 1 in 100, and then throw a level on it every once in a while to go like, yep, you're doing good. Too steep. Let's bring it back up. Things of that nature. If you've got a good excavator driver, they'll be amazing. We worked with a Mini X guy who sized down from a 2-ton because he could do more in the Mini X than a 2-ton could. He was that good. He also controlled the controllers with his elbows because he was smoking and drinking coffee. So most of the times he had dexterity in his elbows. But the last time we made a pad, we brought out the site level. He goes, "Oh, you're still checking my work, eh? Haven't figured it out, have you?" And we check it, and sure enough, it's within a 32nd of an inch. It's just like insane, just all eyeballed. So you'll find those people. You may have to go through 1 or 2 and fire 1 or 2. It happens, but yeah, if you find somebody good, basically what you're going to want to do is like a 1 in 100, kind of above and moving out. And then probably what you'll want to do is have it basically taper out. So that way it's almost flat. So that way when that water gets there, it just passively moves out versus like you end it and then it starts to cut out the end of whatever that ditch is.
Oh, I see.
But then after that, once this water flows this way, this may also influence or inform some kind of forestry, food forest, some kind of planting or conversation in this area. So that way you're utilizing that water. Something like that.
Yeah, some good thoughts there. Do you have any idea like what a minimum kind of turnaround should be dimensionally? Like a rough
I used
estimate?
to know because I used to be involved with emergency services. The great thing is if you call the fire department, they'll tell you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We're working on that right now. At least here, it's like, I think it's 28-degree radius, 28 feet radius. I'm sorry. So like if you stuck a little thing in and drew a 28-foot circle.
Yeah. 28. That's smaller than I would have thought,
that's the minimum.
Good in a way.
Well, minimum at a radius that turns into 52 feet. So it's basically half what you have in between here and here. If this is 100 feet.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So it'd be like a half circle here.
But and that's for a fire truck. So it probably doesn't have to be that big.
Yeah. If I'm tight up there for a classical turnaround, like, is it a scenario where I would have to actually just continue? Like, that's sort of what I was thinking with the loop in a way. I go around the house, but that might even be too steep a turn. But you see another way in limited space that I could do some kind of turnaround or just continue like the road somewhere else to get back down to the main road. I don't know.
Yeah, and what it might be, Matt, is I'm going to choose a different color. So basically, it might be that what you end up doing is a bit of a crossback turn, and then you come up to a turnaround, and actually you bring the house closer or you bring woodshed closer.
Right.
Because generally that's going to be a lot cheaper if you're just doing a full pad and it's already relatively flat. And what'll end up happening is you'll get a little bit of a buildup here of material because you'll be padding out. So whenever it's like this, when you cut this, you get a little bit more on the downhill slope. So if you do make a pad and the house goes here, let's say, and then you've got the woodshed beside it, and then the road basically comes this way and out, you'll end up with a bit of extra material. And again, it's that question of like, how do you dehydrate this? And so if you do this up here, chances are you won't need to worry about doing it on the pad if you do it that way. But if you do a road, this is where, if you can get a sense from your builder what the per foot or 100-foot cost is of the road, and what the area is for the pad, then you can run like option A, option B, option C, and talk a little bit with them about what that value might be, because chances are there's going to be a value in one or the other. Whenever you reduce the steepness of that road, you're going to be a happier camper generally. Because once you get into winter, remind me a little bit about your winter. Do you guys get heavy snowfall? Does it things ice up?
Yeah, it's cold. It's
Yeah.
cold. It's wintry for sure.
So having cleared a fair number of driveways that were designed like this, the person, the part of me that doesn't like labor looks at this and goes, okay. That
Which
might
one?
be
my brown one?
Your brown. Yeah, this might be a bit steep.
Yeah.
And it may just make clearing a bit more frustrating. So I don't know how I don't know how you started to think about that. I don't know if somebody locally plows or if you're thinking about getting a plow yourself.
Yeah.
Generally with machinery, and this is true across, this is my rule for machinery. You know, if I'm not using it somewhere in the order of like 8 to 10 days a month for pretty much the entire year, I'm not buying it. I'm renting it, or I'm seeing if somebody else. So I did this option with values-based decision making. And this option where it's like, we buy an ATV and plow, we buy an old truck and plow, we buy a tractor with plow, or we hire a neighbor to plow, or we hire a company to plow. There were all these kind of options. And it's like per plow, the having any of the vehicles doing all the maintenance ended up being like a per plow being something in the order of like a $450 per hour cost. Because when you start averaging the cost of owning equipment, it gets really high. And then when we went down to guy coming and doing plow, it was $45 an hour. It was like, okay. So, you know, called around, found a dude who said, oh yeah, I plow for somebody up your way. When there's a half an inch of snow, I'm up there. It's like, well, we won't be calling you that much. Like when it becomes a problem for us to drive, we'll hire you. And so I think on a year we paid $300 to plow or drive is what it was.
Right.
Like ridiculously cheap. So
it's
just keep those things in mind.
It's good. Yeah. Good thought. Like
because
good metric that 8 to 10 days.
Yeah. Because maintenance is always the one that kicks you. Always.
And you know, the obvious, so it's actually a couple of excavators that I've met with suggest this brown line straight up, because you've got momentum. It's a straight line. You got momentum. These are the people I'm dealing with. I don't know. That sounds a little wild,
Mr. Running Start. Okay.
Yeah. So running start on the main road straight up. Great, we got up, and then I guess if it's really icy and you have to come down, it's a straight shot down. Hopefully you don't slide off the road, right? But that's their logic. What you're telling me and kind of where my intuition goes is do that like more gradual meandering driveway, even though it's probably twice the length, pay the cost, but you're going to be a lot happier with the final sort of slope up.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, and the other problem is that working perpendicular to contour means you're going to have channelization of water. So basically, the water will find the ditches, they'll find your ruts, and they'll destroy the road quicker than if you're on contour or off contour and you've done. I'm just going to switch colors here so it makes a bit more sense, and I'll drop down my line weight. So if you end up being conscientious about your ditches and where they go and how they operate, then all of a sudden that conversation becomes a non-starter, and now your maintenance of road may be every 15 years to get a regrade and a little bit top up in the crown versus maybe in 5 or 10. Yeah. So I'd be conscientious about that. And, you know, price it out, you know, and it's always about catastrophic failure. If you and your family go off-roading unintentionally backwards in the winter on ice, what's the lost opportunity cost in my most actuary language than spending a little bit more upfront and then having a road that you don't have to worry about for the rest of time? Because I think when we talked originally, you said you don't imagine moving out of this property. You imagine like this will be a feet first property. You'll be carried out by your feet on a stretcher when you're dead.
Yeah, I think that's the plan.
Right. So again, think of Matt at 90 taking a run up his icy driveway, or an opposite, being stuck in his house because he can't get down his icy driveway and he's worried about coming back to his wife alive.
Yeah.
So everything's great when you're young and healthy. Everything's perfect when you're young and healthy. What you have to think about, and this is where Mollison gets into it, he's like, we're time scouts. Bill Mollison, founder of Permaculture. Permaculturists are time scouts. We look into the future. we're bridging one of the major facultative gaps in Homo sapiens, which is our big cognitive leap was being able to perceive the future, and our big de-evolution over the last 150 years due to corporate consumerism and the culture of convenience is going, it doesn't matter, I just press a button or call somebody. It's like, well, what if nobody's there? Like, what if we design something that has so much utility and functionality that, yes, it's front end loaded, like all good systems, all like buy one systems, but it means we don't have to think about it again until our kids sell this place or our kids move back in, after they've decided that, mom and dad have left this to us and it's a great spot and dad made good decisions. So we're going to go back. So it's those types of things that I really think about when I'm designing anything that is long-term infrastructure, and roads are right up there. If you take a look at the PA scale of PA Yeoman scale of permanence for all things agricultural, like roads are fifth. It's like even before, or maybe third or fourth, even before buildings, it's access. How do you get in? How do you get out? How do you do it safely?
Yeah, I see that, and that's why I'm kind of struggling with this, because I want to do it right. Is there a slope, like in my climate, this snowy, wintry
I'd have to take a look at the charts on it, because there is a number of charts on it, but I'm pretty sure in this book, yes, so Z-Dike here, hold on, yeah, Z-Dike goes into max slope and min slope depending on climate. And what grade reversal looks like and all those things. So
it's in that book. Okay.
It's in that book. Yeah, that's why I wanted to send it to you guys, because it's such a stellar book. Like, he was very conscientious about making sure. Oh, here we go. Yeah, so it's based on soil type. So highly erosive or sandy. Basically it's 2 to 4%, 500 feet, 5 to 8%, 300 feet, 9 to 12%, 200 feet. Intermittent erosive clay or loam, it's 700 feet for 2 to 4%, 500 feet for 5 to 8%. So you see what's happening here, right? Like, if you have a lower slope, you have a longer run, right? Or pardon me, if you have a lower slope, you can have a shorter run. If you have a high rate, you have to be conscientious about that. And then low erosive shale or gravel, you can get it's 2 to 4% for 900 feet, 5 to 8% for 700, and 9 to 12 for 500. That's on page 27, the bottom of page 27, to get a sense of what your slope indication would be. And then he's got a great conversation about how to harvest water off of these as well, and like the different tools. It is the best book. And then if you go to maintenance treatments, which is on page 43, you're going to get a sense of what your road profiles might look like. And basically, once you're getting into a not perpendicular, you're getting into a back and forth here. Actually, maybe I'll share my screen and show you the different cuts here. You'll probably go with an in cut or in slope cut. There we go. Cool. So I'm going to stop share here. Screen share. Yeah. So, this crown conversation, crowns with vegetative drainage. It's called insloped, what's called outslope, what's called bermed and elevated. You're probably on both of those. You're probably looking at an insloped or a crowned with vegetative drain ditch. One of those two, I would imagine you'd be looking at something like that. So that way you still, like, the reason why you do it in this way is so that way the majority of the road will always be consistent and it's always draining into ditch. Whereas if you do crowned with vegetative drain ditch, you still get that crown conversation, but you get equal movement of water. Insloped is usually when you're trying to capture as much water as you can off the road to some sort of impoundment. So, like, let's say you ended up with a pond at the end of this area. Oh, right, we lost it because I stopped sharing. So I'm just gonna grab yield. Cool, great. So say we do something like this. If you decided to put a pond here in some way, shape, or form, you'd probably do inslope, so that way you could capture all this water and it would fill this up, right? But without that, you probably would do crowned, I would imagine. That would probably make good sense. I think probably what you may want to do, Matt, is read through Bill Z-Dike's book, come up with a design, and let's do a little red penning on it. Let's take a look at it and see where it might make good sense, where it is, and then you can also calculate your slopes as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Super helpful. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Carl.
So welcome.
You too, Carl.
Can I ask two things? The nice thing about that switchback road too is you have places to put that snow. And, you know, kind of get it off that part of the road, like have a little run out there. You can pile it up. When it melts, it's not going to affect your road. The other question I have is, I don't know what your stage is in planning, but like your house is facing south. I'm assuming the bottom is south. And like, what do you want to have out your south facing view? I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't want to have a big driveway there. I'd want to have some beauty in my garden and that sort of thing. I was thinking maybe you swap those two so that your house is facing out on a vista that's more, you know, like the busyness and the shop and the turnarounds are kind of behind the house, maybe. Just a thought, something to so that your sun side and all of that is where you have views and garden and beauty and park and whatever else is important to you. I don't know what's important.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. We originally let me go over to it. I'll show you. We were thinking about the house basically up here.
I can't see what you're doing.
Here,
Oh, you know, it's
oh no, yeah, he's moving it.
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
moving it.
Yeah, I just moved it on the actual thing.
Yeah.
We were thinking about that, and it would probably do more of like this in that area, and then that road would come up behind it, and then the views are to that southeast there, you know. But it's a lot steeper up there, and it changes you know, we'd probably have to do a walkout basement type thing, which is fine, but it's a, you know, a little bit less functional in some ways because of the slope up there. So you can't walk out of the house and
or what about
around
just
very
swapping
easily.
out the wood shed in the house location?
That's kind of that seems like a logical idea.
Just thoughts.
Sure. Then it's I'm taking down a bunch of trees here and it opens up the view, but I can plan for that, you know. It's a good thought for sure.
Yeah, well said.
I don't know what's your place. It'd be nice to see photos of what the views are from the various spots, but just yeah.
The other thing to think of, and this is kind of down the road, but let's put as many road jokes in our conversation today as we can. I just want to make sure we're all clear on the objective for today. So there's a whole science and art in setting up snow fences. And years ago, there's a pretty popular, famous ski hill in Canada near where I grew up called Sunshine Village. And they brought a farmer out who'd been setting up snow fences for the better part of 5 decades. And basically he sat in during a couple of storms, tented up there and figured out where to put the snow fences to collect as much snow as possible. So that way it was collected in such a way so that way you start to build up the base. And so they do that coming into the winter. This is so funny. I don't know if you guys know this, but it now has AI. So if you raise your hand, it raises your hand. Like it puts it up on the corner. Yeah. Scary, very scary. Yeah. Let's not go there. Let's stay on snow fences. So with the snow fence conversation, there's this whole science to it. And we started playing with it, and I tell you, after about a couple of seasons, you get it down pat, so you see where it's capturing. We ended up reducing our snow plow, and that's why we were down to 1 or 2 a year, because we were conscientious of where that snow was falling because of the way the storm patterns were working. So consider that as well. There could be an opportunity to learn that process and conversation to bounder probably up top here. I don't exactly know because I'm just guessing at this point, but something that may look something like this in terms of the storm patterns. But keep that in mind that it's not a terrible thing to see orange fencing with removable T-bar in the winter, because it reduces the amount of time, money, and effort you have, and it just makes a more drivable access to your house.
No, just be temporary fencing, like
that's it.
Seasonally,
yeah, like coming into winter, it's like when you're you're taking everything out of the garden, you're blowing out or removing irrigation, you're doing all those winterization chores. This is one of those winterization chores that you put up, you mark the spots, you geolocate point A and point B on fence 1, A and B on fence 2, A and B on point 3. You have documentation. I think we talked about this originally. We've got in iOS, we've got a GPS kit, which is a great application where you can take photos, georeference them, bring them into Google Earth, and they populate. So you can take a look year to year to year. What did the snowfall look like on each of these fences? If you're using Android, it's Gaia, Gaia, G-I-A-A.
Yeah, I have been using that actually a little
Okay,
bit.
great.
It's very cool. Yeah.
Awesome. But that way you can take, an experiment, a snow fence experiment, and you can record the data on it from year to year, and you can start to adjust. And that's the great thing about, removable snow fences and having a shop that close. It's like, pick them all up in the truck, bring them up to the shop, put them away, and then they're ready for next year.
Yeah, it's a good idea. I just wanted to share this too.
Yeah, let me
Carol, is the view from where I just put the house.
Wow.
So that was originally what we wanted to capture.
Nice.
But it's tough up there. You can't tell much from the photo. It's just a little, it's tricky.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you want to have room for, we actually had some really pretty spots on our land, and then a neat pond spot and everything. But like you were saying, Javan, we were thinking about Oz is 72, I'm 62. We want to be in our 90s up there. And there was just enough slope where I'm like, I don't want to be, my mom's just turned 90 and she's falling a lot. And it's like, I don't want to be tottering around and end up rolling down the hill. So we picked sort of a less gorgeous spot because it's so much more level, and we'll make our gorgeousness, we don't have that kind of a view, and there's spots way up high that have stunning views, but again, road maintenance, just the rutting already there. And I have a friend who did that on his land, and they spend 10 grand a year. A year.
Yeah.
It's insane. I mean, it would have been cheaper for them to pave it.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that's to your point, that just the ability to leave your house, walk around safely.
Right.
And I have young kids, same thing, in a way. They don't need to be rolling down the hill.
Yeah, go out to your garden, your chicken house, whatever, and have it be,
It's that kind of zone 1 conversation. How accessible is everything in zone 1? If you're on a steep slope, it's not very.
Unless you terrace, but that's a lot of work and expense as well. And then when you get older, do you want to be going up and down steps or whatever?
Yeah, so.
Plus with a lot of snow, again, snow removal, how do you get different things to remove snow in those areas if you need to, whatever?
Yeah. So that's why we moved, or where I'm starting to rethink, down a little lower where you see the workshop and all that area is probably less aesthetically pleasing, but still nice and much more usable space in a way.
Yeah. And I don't know if there's any value in moving up, but this is me just shooting the shit here, really. If you come up this way and you're on grade, and let's say the wraparound is here, and let's say the house goes generally where it was originally and the workshop kind of goes behind, that's another option as well. Something to that effect. I know you're getting closer to your wet spot and your wetland and things of that nature, but it's one of those things where, Matt, if this were I would put each element. I'd probably go to Google Earth Pro only because I can take my line lengths pretty easily. And also my pad areas. And then I would do a comparative analysis for cost. I would chat with my partner and go what's the pros and cons of A, pros and cons of B's, pros and cons of C's. And ultimately, how does this work for short term, middle term, and long term? So I think we've talked about it before, but I developed this process called values-based decision making off of Alan Savory's holistic management or holistic decision making. And when you're doing this, you're always thinking, what are the values for the site? What do we want to be true for the site? And does this very technical application or design for this road actually meet our bigger values for the longest term possible? Or is it a short-term value? And then, once we change physically, that's going to be more of a problem. Or once we can't take a running start on an icy driveway. And we've lost the testosterone of these
Yeah,
excavator drivers who never
pretty
offered it
much.
in the first place.
That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. Yeah. I know.
So yeah, that's generally how I go about it, as I take a look at those conversations. And that's the due diligence as designers we do for clients, is we go, here's the 3 options, and usually we do it for them. So we say, here's 3 options. Here's why option B and C are terrible, but they were options on the board. And maybe one of them gave us that option. I just did a little job in Washington, and it was similar. You know, one of the people in the couple wanted it A, or wanted it B. The other one wanted it C. I saw A as being the best option for the land and for their money, because again, I'm an advocate for my client's land first, my client's money second, and my client's wants third. So I'm always looking at the topography and going, well, that's a lot of time, money, and expense, not only in this year, but in 25 years. So why don't we be conscientious about doing it in a way that may not be your idea of aesthetically pleasing, but how can we make it aesthetically pleasing if that's an issue? And sometimes people want the aesthetically pleasing and they're willing to pay the maintenance cost for the rest of time. Okay, sure.
Yeah. Until you talk to them 20 years later.
They never
so
call
hot
back.
on that
They
original
never
idea.
call back.
Yeah, right.
No, the way humans make decisions, we don't like being told we're wrong, and we definitely don't like telling other people we're wrong.
Right.
Which is why it's a practice I've embedded into my life. When I'm wrong, I try to talk about it as much as possible, to be like, okay, this is normalizing it for me as behavior. But when you look at this,
Yeah,
I would take a look at your brown line. I would take a look at the switchback line. I would take a look at this line. And just see, you know, like, sure, there'll be a cost of removal of trees. Sure, there'll be a cost of material. Get a sense of cost of material per 10, 100, whatever. Get a unit so you can start to do a cost comparison. And then also get a sense of like what the timing would cost, because they're likely going to charge you material and they're going to charge you time. So, you know, if you send it to 3 different excavators and say, here's my 3 options, give me a cost for each, and send it to as many companies as there are in your area, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
And then sometimes I send the quotes that the other guy gave to the other guy as well.
Not a bad idea.
Well,
honestly,
hey, let's keep everybody honest.
You know,
let's keep everybody honest.
Yeah.
You know,
sure.
let's have a great product. That my brother just built a garage, and it was an awkward garage. It was a weird rhomboid shape. And he had for his concrete quote 64,000, 62,000, and 39,000.
Wow.
That's wild. Yeah.
It's
That's
a little
wild.
It's a little insane. So that's what I do, Matt. I would compare them.
And you actually create the market that way too.
Correct.
By sharing the quotes.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
All right. Well, thank you very much for taking the time and sharing your thoughts, both of you. Appreciate it.
You know, one other thought I had, how many kids do you have?
2, a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old.
You know, that beautiful spot with the view? That would make an amazing camp shack.
Totally.
You know, like up on stilts or something.
Yeah.
Which would make it easy to have a compost chute right down to a composter, you know, one of those Jeff Lawton things with the rolling cans that you just, when it gets full, you set it to the side and then you just put another one in there. And I mean, that would be a really neat family getaway. And as they get older, it could be their little, you know, when they have their friends over, they can all go stay out at the camp shack or whatever. I mean, it'd be a really special spot. Maybe even some decking around it up high. Really cool.
Yeah, that's a great idea, and I've thought of that too.
Even making it with them, you know, when they get old enough. But maybe you want it sooner. But anyway.
No, that's a great idea. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Carol, any questions for our remaining 17 minutes?
I've kind of dropped off the face of the earth in this course. I've just spent the last 2 days trenching for my power to go in, and I laid some conduit, which I'm like, yeah, there's conduit in the trench. We still got a ways to go, but we met with the guy to build the barn, and I'm really excited. I had this quote brilliant idea. I'm claiming it as brilliant. it was a small noble fir kind of planting for people to do cuttings off of. And it was right where and they were small trees that weren't thriving. So I cleared all that with the excavator, and there's this huge stack of a little mini forest of trees sitting there. And we were talking about, he's like, if you put gravel on the whole spot now, I'm going to have my truck and it's going to grind it into the ground. And so, but if it starts to rain, and I realize but I want to spread the gravel between the posts, because once we get the roof and everything on, we only have a 10-foot garage door. So the truck's not going to be able to go in and spread it for me. So it's going to be one scoop at a time. I'm going to chip those trees up into really coarse chippings and put that all around the outside.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Yeah, so they'll never leave the site, and they'll, as they rot down, they'll create humus and stuff, because we got to skin that whole top off
Yeah.
for them to get in there and build it. So I'm really excited about that. And we'll probably rent somebody to come in who has one of those giant chippers that you can put an 8-foot diameter tree through it. And there's all kinds of little slash piles out there, particularly close to where the house wants to go. So we can have them chip all that stuff up, just run it all through. And we'll use it to cover the area around the barn, so that you can drive on it without soaking into the clay mud there.
Awesome.
Yeah. So anyway, I apologize. I don't have any, the valuable, useful, brilliant questions, because we're just sort of implementing. But I'm excited. I think we're going to get our first goal, which is to get the barn and the power in. And then hopefully, if there's enough time left in the season, we'll get the road guy into, because I'm tearing that road up. I'm a 40-hour excavator person, so I don't have a lot of experience. So when I turn, I leave all my gravels a mess. And so I'm going to have to spend some money too. But I appreciate those road things, because we have some steep areas, and if we want to keep those roads, I've done a few water bars, but road maintenance is no joke. And we don't get the kind of snow that you get. A lot of rain, but not so much snow.
Yeah, it's a huge factor. This book looks great too. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, you're so welcome. He's just, it is totally available anywhere. Okay, good. I'm actually just going to take a quick moment and put this into our document, so that way anybody who's reading or watching this later can grab it. So book, and then this.
I'm really grateful that we have lifelong access, because I want to go back and watch these and do more of the exercises and everything. And it's just, we have this window of dry season here where you just got to make stuff happen. And the prices came in way too high. And so since we did have some equipment, I'm like, I got to do this myself. So.
Yep. Yeah, and that's part of it. Sometimes it's just, it doesn't make sense to hire somebody. Sometimes it's just sweat equity that goes into it.
Well, especially as you pointed out, it's silly to buy stuff when you're not using it a lot. We invested in a mini X, or actually a compact. It's 4 tons. So we have equipment. So it's like, that's why we bought it, was because we wanted to save money on the drain field, the this, the that, and the other. And just in the little bit of time I've been working, I'm getting so much better at digging a more uniform ditch, which is what's going to happen for my drain field. And so, this is why we bought it. So 5 years of getting that house built, putting in a few ponds and or terraces, then we can probably sell it for close to what we'd put into it.
It seems that way in terms of machinery appreciation. I think the other thing is in your situation where it's a longer lead time, there's more things you're doing, and you have so much interest and time to do those things because of where you're at in your life and your career, and phasing into this conversation, that you're going to build a skill as well. So within 5 or 6 years, you're going to be really skilled on this machine potentially. And that's potentially something that you can either, barter or work with friends or neighbors, or conversations there where it's like, you rent the machine, I'll come and run it, and this is what I'll do. And this is, the exchange. So I think wherever we can build skill, tangible skill of transforming landscape, it's 100% worth the value. The problem becomes if somebody grabs an excavator and they buy one and they're building a homestead, and all they have to do is clear a pad. It's like you're never going to make that back in skill. But no one's ever going to hire you if you have no skill in an excavator for excavator driver. So, you know, that's that amazing trade-off of like understanding all the different facets into it. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I've got one thing to show you folks if you're interested. So I went and did this. I was out and about, ended up, can you guys see this photo? Have I showed this to you yet? Is this new for you guys?
There's no photo in there yet.
It says it's starting
there.
to share. There it is.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Have you seen this?
No.
Okay. We're going to start with the quiz. How was this photo made? This is a photo. How is this photo made? And what are you seeing? No wrong answers. I've had lots of funny answers. That's totally fine. What are you seeing here?
I want to say a drone very
Yeah.
high in the
Right.
air.
Too.
Shot by drone, 100%. Great.
Mhm.
What are
And
we?
what are those little round things?
Right. What are those little round things? Any guesses?
Beehives?
Not beehives.
You put those in there for a reason.
Partially
To
correct.
be seen in this photo from above.
Very correct.
I don't
Very
know
correct.
why, though.
And generally, what do you think those lines are indicative of?
Contour?
A contour. Nice, nice. This is
Yeah.
good, actually. This is a good quiz. I'm glad that
Yeah.
you're doing this. These are contours. I did put whatever made this into that landscape, or more accurately, I directed the human who was wearing the large sun hat. And here's what happened. I'll tell you what happened. So we go to this project, and basically this project is that these folks bought this house, and this road cuts off a drainage. So you can kind of see the drainage here, right?
Yeah.
So I'll bring up old blue. There we go. So this is the drainage here. Yeah.
Yeah.
And here's the ridge. Oh, let's try again. Here's the ridge. Kind of comes up this way. And so the pad's been brought out and everything else. So one of the issues is the house is up here, and they can't use any of this space because there's so many utilities that are coming in and out of the house here. We can't do the gardening space that I would want to here. And so we kind of have these two options. Option one is build retaining walls down here. So build retaining walls like so, and then bring in pit run from the local quarry, which is really cheap, and basically backfill to create these terraces. So these would be terraces, and this would be the bottom or the back edge of the terrace coming into the slope. So my buddy, he tells me, I land on the island to spend 3 days with him. He goes, I've got us a job. I'm like, that's a terrible idea. I'm not here to work. And he goes, okay, but it's a cool job. Let me tell you the idea. And so he tells it to me. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And I say, well, we're going to go do this other little job. If you want, we can come back early and we can lay out the contours with flags, the neon surveyor flags. I'll pop the drone up. We'll take a photo of it. And then we can take this image into something like Google SketchUp, and I can create volume so we know how much pit run we have to go and order, and they can get a sense of what their costing is. He's like, great. So we put out the flags, we survey all of this, we put out the flags, and at about 10 feet, you can't see the flags. It's too bright. This is the issue about running drones in full sunlight. Like overcast is beautiful and brilliant for drones. So I'm sitting there and I'm looking at this problem and I'm going, okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to pop the drone up so I can see everything. I'm going to leave it steady. I'm going to hit record. You're going to put on my sun hat, and then you're going to walk the line. And then hopefully I can figure out, here we go. You can see the sun hat now and him walking. And I'm going to try and figure out at the end of this, because I'm sure there's a way to do it. I have no idea if I can, if we can stitch this together. So that's exactly what we did. And that's what this photo is. So the way this works, I'll draw this all out for you folks, because I think you'll appreciate this when we got a little bit of time. So basically this will be a rock wall, comes down into the valley. There'll be a short rock wall that comes up like this and creates these two terraces in the draw or in the drainage. So basically you're going to have terrace here and you're going to have terrace here. Now, what's interesting is once we get onto the slope, you really see the vegetative change. This is soil. This is no soil. This is crushed shale. You can see the crushed shale here. So this is all shale and this is all soil. So we don't need to use this same pattern of rock wall when we get here. We can just create a terrace. Now, what we'll use in this case is we'll use this line now as the line for the mid slope. And so basically we'll use this. And so this top area will flip down. And so we'll end up with this big wide terrace. That's how this will work. And then there will be a earthen slope this time, like so. Same thing down here, earthen slope. And then we're going to end up with this big top terrace, probably something like this. So what we'll end up with is an area up top to do trees, which is, they're the best for weathering all the wind that's going to be on this site. So there'll be a bunch of trees up here. And then we're going to do, I'm going to switch my color here. Then we're going to do lines for trellises. So these will be like grapes and berries and everything that we can trellis. And then over here, what we'll end up doing is probably putting the greenhouse right in the bowl. And the cool thing about putting the greenhouse in the bowl is it's going to get just a whack of sun. So we're going to put something like greenhouse here. And then we're going to put a whole bunch of growing boxes kind of out front with a number of different sort of hoops with shade cover and plastic cover, so that way they can grow what they need to grow. And these folks in particular actually want this, like they want this pool. So we're thinking the pool is going to go up here, and then this will be sort of relaxation area and whatnot. What's really funny is these are ocean spray, and you can see they kind of look like balls, and that's because the deer have been doing most of the gardening work, and they've been coming up and they've been trimming up all these. So what'll happen is if we fence this area, things will change pretty dramatically. So the fencing conversation will probably look pretty tight overall. It'll probably look something like, you know, coming up into here, coming around here, and then coming up top, something simple like this. So just a fun little example of how we use the tools around us. We're reflective upon a design site. And ultimately, if this area over here proves too expensive, then generally everything will shift to this area. We'll generally shift everything here, and we'll probably work in now into some kind of access on the right-hand side instead.
Where is all that water going to go that used to flow through that draw?
So the funny thing is that this draw is totally dried up. This water no longer falls because of the road. So the road created a dam impoundment. So now the water is on the North Hill side, and then comes through and then filters down. It's funny, they concreted this sort of flow form. So the water actually, the pipe I think comes out, oh, there it is, the pipe's right there. The water then kind of crisscrosses back this exposed bedrock and then comes down into this pond that's been lined. Yeah.
Another question, why not use on the earthen side, with the earthen walls, why not put your trellises and berries and or grapes and things on those walls?
The slopes will be planted.
Yeah.
So the slopes will be 100 planted. The one thing I've learned about planting on slope is generally you have to be conscientious of a fast growing pioneer to stitch up the slope. It's a very sandy shale. So we'll probably use fast growing natives that will stitch the slope quickly and are usually sort of bush to low tree form. So that way you still have your solar angles, but you're totally right. The one reason why we won't plant down here anything we're going to harvest is that the angle will be such that accessing it would be problematic. But I think you're totally right. Putting planting the slope will definitely be something with edibles or with other functional plants will be something we'll do. I think the angle of repose on it will be such that if we don't put in like steppers into the slope, it'll be problematic for harvest. But one of my favorite things to do is to plant a tree on a slope in such a way so that way, you know, a semi-standard or standard tree is at picking height.
Yeah, I was just going to say that'd be a great place for your fruit orchard, especially if you did like semi-dwarfs or
totally
something small enough that you could reach them.
So usually we'll do something like that here. And so that way what it ends up looking like in terms of the drawing is you end up with your slope and then your slope again. So let's be A to A. That's a lot of green. That's unfortunate. A to A to A. Javan, choose a different color, would you? So basically, yeah, you'll probably have something like this. And so, you know, you've got that ability to access. The one question is, and this is always the question with solar angles, which is why I bring it up in the class so early, is we want to make sure that the winter solar angle, which I think is 18% here, will actually reach the majority of these trees up here.
Right,
so
right.
one of those things is we may delay this planting by 3 or 4 years and let these guys, I'm going to go back to my circle. These guys can get themselves situated in short order. But we'll have to see how that all works
Well, or
out.
that might be the reason to put in berries, because they won't get very tall.
100%, 100%. The
Yeah,
one
with like-
question again is accessibility. The way I do berries is I want to have direct accessibility. I don't want to
Yep.
be hunting for my berries. This is where me and permaculture, we don't part ways, but we're not totally congruent. I like rows. I like everything that I'm going to pick in a row. Because why? If I pick raspberries, I want to have a day of picking raspberries. I don't want to be like, where's the other raspberry bush? Did I lose it? What's that over there? Very frustrating to me. Aesthetic design's different story. But in terms of production, if I'm producing enough raspberries for me and mine and a little bit for sale, I want one row, structurally sound, trellised appropriately, and that way you can blitz the roll, come back, you're done. So one of the issues is when you're on slope, there's an issue of access from the top and access from the bottom. And so really you want to think about what you plant for accessibility in that conversation.
Mhm.
Yeah. But anyways, I wanted to show that to you, give you a little insight into what the designs have been as of late. And
Thanks for sharing.
you're welcome. It was an innovation, unexpected innovation. And it was a super fun little moment that made us all giggle.
Yeah, it looks great too.
Yeah, it does.
All these little circles.
I thought they were little like skeps, little bee skeps.
Ah, there we go. Yeah, yeah. No, it was
That's
my
something you could put on some of those slopes, is bee houses.
And this is the thing where, we can do something, but should we do something compared to the skill set of the individuals who own the site? And how do you develop enough? One of the designs I'll do for folks, these folks haven't asked for it. Oh, this is interesting. This hasn't been on the whole time. You guys are just hearing me through this. I have what's called a nectar flow guide. And so when we're doing nectar flows, somebody says, hey, we want bees. We'll then engage in a nectar flow guide, which is you basically chart the flowering times of all the potential varieties that are going to be on site, and you get a sense of what year they come to maturity. So that way you have enough food on site for the bees. One of the things we found as I was starting to beekeep and do, what were they calling it? Wingnut beekeeping and backwards beekeeping, as we started to not go with Langstroth and go with these different types of hive designs and different types of treatment for Varroa and whatnot, was there just isn't enough food in the places where we put our bees. This is why bees get moved up to alpine to harvest with wildflowers and whatnot. So we, as designers, we developed this process of a nectar flow guide to get a sense of like how much nectar is flowing throughout the year, and do we have enough for these bees, or are we just planting? Are we force functioning? Are we going through the permaculture homesteading store, grabbing something and plunking it into the landscape when the needs and yields analysis actually doesn't support it? And so, yes, we could absolutely put beehives there. It was definitely talked about doing quite a number of mason beehives and mason houses, just so that way there's going to be some introduction. It's already wanting, it's so weird. Put that up and all of a sudden this little thing comes up and there goes the hand. Wild. But generally what we're trying to do is make sure that everything's there and necessary for what the next phase of that is. So in this conversation, it would be first and foremost, make sure to have that nectar flow, make sure that's flowing. And we know it's flowing if they're getting enough food. If the people are getting enough food, it can support the bees. And then we'll add in the bees at sort of a tertiary livestock conversation. Same thing with chickens. I don't like putting chickens into a landscape on year one. I generally like to have a little bit more fodder for them. Doesn't mean you can't buy fodder. Doesn't mean, they're not eating, they're going to eat kitchen scraps, but it's not going to be enough. So generally it's like, how can we produce enough food for them so that way we phase them in appropriately? But at the same time, on the other side, this is why there's always multi-factors, and this is why permaculture design and education is a spiral. These folks might say, we really want to learn the skill and we want it now, and we want to have a little bit of food security, which is fine until you realize that the food you're feeding your food is coming from a supply chain that would also be affected by whatever the boogeyman is that you're using for food security, right? And there's always a boogeyman, and all of them have a probability and a possibility. Some are highly possible, some are highly probable, some are possible and low probability. I find I do a lot of talking my family members off the probability conversation and into the possibility conversation, because they're not usually aware of what might or may not happen. And I think COVID woke a lot of them up to the point to where, like, direct family members, I see their gardens now. They're like, what else do you think I should do? I'm like, more is what I think you should do. I had so
You'd
many.
be a nice uncle to have.
Sometimes,
Yeah, for
sometimes they go like, hey, tell me what you think's going to happen in the next 12 years. It's like, you don't want to know that. You have not had enough alcohol and you're far too shiny right now for me to have this conversation with you. So anyways, I could regale you folks with stories, but I do have to get ready for my next piece. It was great chatting. Hopefully that was helpful, Matt. Definitely go through the book, design a couple options, go through with your wife, take a look at the different options, costs, talk to the excavator drivers. And if you want feedback on that, even before our next call, feel free just to send it to me. I'm happy to give you some feedback, some video feedback. And yeah, we only got one left. So any questions, comments, queries, let me know. And for everybody else watching, Matt included, because I know Carol, you've made a different choice, which I think is a good choice with the course. All assignments are due on our final day. That's everything. There is no extension after that date. So everything has to be in on that final date. And I'm just going to make sure I look at it. So I say this publicly on this forum, because people always forget this. So yeah, we've got August 28th at 9 a.m. Everything is due. That includes resubmissions. That includes final designs. If you want to submit early, totally fair, totally fine. Happy to do that, especially because I can give you early feedback. And if you want to do some revamp, that's fine. But I think that's it. That's all. So if there's no more questions from you two fine folk, I think we'll call it and we'll see each other in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Javan.
You're so welcome. Take care, everybody. All the best.
Take care.